The Santorini Volcanic Eruption of 1613 BC, the largest volcanic eruption ever experienced by mankind. New data on the dating of the eruption and its consequences on the Minoan and Egyptian civilizations. Interview with volcanologist Dr. George Vouyoukakis. It was a spring, and this is proven by seeds and pollen grains found in volcanic ash. And with spring, of course, as Passover. We know that that was the exodus of Moses and the tribes of Israel from Egypt in the spring. That's the time of the Passover. It was spring, and this is proven by seeds and pollen grains found in the volcanic ash. In 1613 BC, when the largest volcanic eruption that humanity has known in at least the past 10,000 years took place, which completely destroyed Santorini, Thera, and the nearby islands with a radius of many kilometers. Tidal waves rose from the eruption, which swept the coasts of the nearby islands and northern Crete. These may have destroyed some coastal settlements, but they may not have caused the beginning of the decline of the Minoan civilization, according to volcanologist Dr. Vouyoukakis, a researcher at the Institute of Geophysical and Mining Research, IGMR, and Vice President Society of the Support of Prehistoric Santorini Studies. And Vouyoukakis, in an interview he gave to Free Research, presented to us the new scientific data that emerged from the use of radioactive carbon C14 dating, tree dating, and ice dating methods, according to which the eruption occurred at least 100 and 150 years earlier than the conventional date of 1500 BC. Which was based on comparative studies of pottery techniques and Egyptian sources. Recently, after the examination by the University of Denmark of an olive branch that had been buried in the ash of the eruption, it was finally verified that the eruption occurred in 1613 BC and lasted only 24 hours, 2 to 3 days. The creation and evolution of the volcano of Thera. Essentially, the issue of the dating of the eruption of the volcano of Thera was already identified in 1613 BC, with a deviation of a few years before or after, which, however, do not exceed a decade. This certainty of ours was sealed with the important newly discovered find, namely an olive branch with roots and leaves found in the caldera of the volcano of Santorini. Previous datings, which had been done on plants with a short lifespan, left us with gaps, while we now can apply a series of C14 datings to the same sample. However, at the same time, other research was conducted by the American Cornell University and at many sites in the Aegean, which confirmed the date of the volcano's eruption being 1613 BC, with a minimal deviation, as we said, a few years before or after. Does the fact, and the question asked, does the fact that no skeletons were found either at Akrotiri or shipwrecks at the sea mean that the inhabitants had predicted the eruption and left much earlier? The evidence we have from the point of view of geology and volcanology tells us that the inhabitants of the island, with all the knowledge they had, did not have time to leave. It was practically impossible even in today's standards. The picture we have is that this huge-scale explosion developed so quickly that it was impossible to abandon the island. When the warning phenomena began and they realized that something very bad was happening, the inhabitants had no possibility of escape because there were too many of them. There were over 10,000 of them. Even if all their merchant ships, which were very many, had gathered to help them, they still would not have had time to evacuate the city because of their number. But the fact that neither skeletons nor shipwrecks were found in Akrotiri is due to the fact that it's the only piece of land that has been found and investigated. The ancient port, however, has not yet been found, and only when we discover it and excavate the places where the inhabitants were gathered, because they would certainly have gathered in the port, we will have important and valuable information about the last dramatic hours of the city, as well as about the fate of its inhabitants. We believe that in the sunken ancient port we will find skeletons, as happened in Heraclium, which was destroyed by the Vesuvius eruption 70 AD. In the first phase of the disaster, a very strong earthquake occurred, and Akrotiri was certainly abandoned because the inhabitants of the island of Santorini had a lot of experience with earthquakes, as can be seen from the continuous reconstructions and the various levels of destruction that the city has suffered before its fatal finale. And we see that it's destroyed again and again by successive earthquakes, and rebuilt even better as the interventions in the buildings after a hit by Enceladus, the earthquakes that is, show us. The city is immediately evacuated and the rescue teams take action, as is happening today with our experiences. Now, they selectively intervene in buildings that may have trapped people and valuable goods inside. The part of Akrotiri of Santorini that we're studying now has been destroyed by an earlier earthquake, as we can see from the interventions in the buildings. The residents, having taken with them everything valuable and useful they had, abandoned the city. 4 phases are recorded in the mechanisms of deposition of the explosion products. During the first phase, a large explosive column of ash, 35 to 36 kilometers high, is created. It lasts about 46 hours and throws out 2 cubic kilometers, that's 4.6 billion tons, of magma into the air. The enormous energy released by the evaporation of water pulverizes large quantities of magma and ejects them at high speed, 80 to 150 meters per second, and temperatures of 150 to 200 degrees Celsius. That's a hot oven, obviously. Now covering the entire island of Santorini with white ash. These successive explosions often create intense shock waves, the destructive efforts of which have been recorded in parts of houses in the prehistoric settlement. In the second explosive phase, clouds of steam and ash move at high speeds radially around the area of the explosion. During the third phase, the area is covered with enormous amounts of volcanic ash. And during the last phase, thick clouds of hot red ash are ejected, which are eventually deposited on the ground or sink into the sea. The entire event, from the first explosions to the creation of the caldera, must not have lasted more than a few, like 2 or 3, 24 hours, 2 or 3 days. The volume of material that was ejected was estimated at least 60 cubic kilometers of magma, or approximately 150 billion tons of rock. Now, how powerful was this explosion, and what data do we have? It was enormous. It could have been a VEI 7. It was the largest volcanic explosion that humanity has ever known, as if it were many Hiroshima bombs combined. The first 24 hours of the explosion stopped every kind of life within the radius of 100 kilometers, and then the tsunamis begin. The first research that was done to identify the power of the explosion, as always, was on land, but the data on its size comes mainly from the underwater area around Santorini. The late data is the volume of magma that it produced, and while in 2005 we estimated that this volume was 30 cubic kilometers, in 2006 and 2007, a new good research showed us 60 cubic kilometers, so it was twice as big, which changes many things, such as the tsunamis, which both Mr. Marinatos and Mr. Galanopoulos had mentioned, but we could not document them precisely. Today, however, we're able to confirm that there were tsunamis, which, however, did not exceed 10 meters, that's about 30 feet. That is, they were of medium size. The field research, which was carried out in Crete, shows that the waves were about 8 meters tall, that's about 24 feet. The Aegean may be an archipelago, but it is a closed sea, and large waves are not favored. Modern society experienced the eruption of Piratumbo, which is 20 times smaller than Santorini, as well as that of Tambora, which has been recorded in historical times and is even smaller. Now, were the tsunamis that destroyed the Minoan Crete? Crete is affected by continuous tsunamis, but they only affected the coastal areas. We have identified, together with our American colleagues, at least 4 sites in Crete that have been destroyed by them, but it was not enough to suddenly collapse a huge civilization such as the Minoan. Besides, the palace of Knossos was too far away to be affected. We still do not know the causes of the destruction of the Minoan civilization. Perhaps it was social, a natural decline of a civilization that exhausted the margins of its development, and then when a society is heading towards a decline, then natural disasters accelerate it. It is characteristic that in the era of their decline, they begin to build fortifications, to fortify the cities with walls, etc., whereas before they did not exist. Certainly, the destruction of the central Aegean, which swept away the surrounding islands, would have played a very serious role in the psychology of decline, but still it was impossible to lead a healthy society to extinction. It's still an enigma, an unsolved mystery. Santorini today, on the right in 3-dimensional schematic geological sections. In Santorini, what kind of society do we have? In Akrotiri, Santorini, in the rich quarter which has been excavated, it's evident that all the inhabitants are having a good time, happiness is widespread, there are no strong contrasts. If this image is representative, then it shows a healthy society. It shows an accumulation of wealth from their work, as well as a distribution of this wealth equally, so that there are no antagonisms. There is no theocracy, no harsh authority. People are free, relaxed, have a beautiful houses with toilets, and even second floors. And they work happily, they are rich, and they enjoy their lives. In the famous mural of the rowers, who appear have broken oars to face the waves, in prehistoric theory, navigation was very developed, and they also had very advanced technology. This is proven by the shape of the ship, the position of the rowers and the rudder. In other words, they built very strong ships capable of traveling very fast safely, but we still cannot prove anything about the strange shape of the oars. The fresco of Akrotiri, which is very ancient because we did not find anything older, confirms the communication of Santorini with the Peloponnese of Greece, because on the opposite ships there are Messenians, and this proves that by their helmets and in general by the whole representation, which seems to be a procession related to the Peloponnese. The olive branch, based on which all the data so far on the relations between the Minoans, Mycenaeans, and Egyptian civilizations are being revised, and on the left is a hole from which the olive branch was taken. Roots reach down in the dark surface, and also a hole in the right branch below is the 1 meter branch. Are the theories of Egyptologists regarding the relations between the Minoan, Mycenaean, and Egyptian civilizations overturned by the new scientific data? Indeed. First of all, if you search Egypt for datings based on the C14 method of dating, you will not find a single one. The English and other schools of archaeology created an entire dating scale, which was based on the ages of the pharaohs and the duration of their reigns. Today, however, they find that some pharaohs are missing, while some have the same names. Therefore, the date of the eruption they gave us was not documented like the current 1613 BC. There's a big difference which they cannot cover. Economies from today's Santorini, which reveal the events of the eruption of 1613 BC, the deposits of volcanic ash from the third phase of the eruption northeast of Ia, and fine grain ash of pyroclastic material from the fourth phase in Monolithos. Now, will the Santorini volcano reactivate and erupt? We certainly expect that Santorini will have another eruption. Simply, the explosions we expect will not have the power of the Minoan, because Santorini gives explosions of this very size every 15,000 to 20,000 years. And then it has the ability to accumulate the energy of a Minoan explosion, that's a VEI-7, which is huge, of course. In the meantime, explosions occur, such as those we experienced in 1925, 1940, and 1950. It's impossible for something similar to occur only 3,000 years later, After 10,000 years, perhaps it will, because these intervals are gradually increasing due to the convergence of tectonic plates. The whole process seems to be slowing down little by little, which means that it produces less magma in space and therefore it takes more time for the magma to reaccumulate. Please leave your comments about this. Thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.